Welcome to the Vision and Purpose podcast, where we dive deep into the lives of incredible people who have made a mark on the world. Join us as we explore the journeys, stories, and passions of individuals who have achieved extraordinary feats, shattered barriers, and inspired us all. And now your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Hello, and welcome to the Vision and Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. I'm excited to welcome my guest for this episode. She is an author, an entrepreneur, and a recognized strategic marketing consultant for science, engineering, and technology organizations. Her latest book is The Giant's Ladder: The Science Professional's Blueprint for Marketing Success. Welcome, Elizabeth Chabe.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited that you are here. When I saw the title of your book, I said, oh my goodness, we've got to have this discussion on the Giant's Ladder. I absolutely love it. And I actually want you to start by telling our listeners and our viewers just a little bit about yourself, your background, and this whole strategic marketing, especially within the science and professional sectors.
Sure. So my name is Elizabeth, as you said, and I'm the CEO of High Touch Group, which is a marketing agency that focuses on science, engineering, and technology organizations. What that means is we work mostly with scientists day in and day out, and that's been my life for the last 15 years. And one element of that I have noticed that rings true for the scientist turned entrepreneur is that very often they're incredibly well trained with scientific communication. So what you need to, how you need to write, how you need to talk about your data and your analysis, conclusions of your studies for presenting your work at a scientific conference or a seminar or getting published in a peer-reviewed journal. Where they tend to be a little less skilled usually is in persuasive communication, so marketing. And so what my agency does is we work with scientific teams to help them be a bit more persuasive in their communications. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of problems facing the world right now. We hear a lot about climate change every day. We hear a lot about pandemic preparedness and pandemic response and the future of what that might look like. A lot of the innovations that could solve those problems get stuck in the laboratory and don't spin out into successful commercial ventures. And my running theory, and the theory of a lot of people with a venture capital background, often is that we aren't training those scientists well enough to really become the scientist entrepreneurs that we need them to be. And so what my book tries to do is help arm those scientist entrepreneurs with the marketing communication skills that they need to bring their products or solutions to market successfully. I help them commercialize them.
Wow. So what actually drew you to specialize in marketing for science professionals? And then what are some of those unique challenges or opportunities that you see in this particular niche?
That's such a great question. One of my favorite stories, and I start my introduction of my book to sharing this, just because the path for science marketers tends to be very unique. A lot of us come from a laboratory environment, and it turns out we just happen to be more skilled at communication maybe than bench science. In my case, I saw Professor Habib Dagger at the University of Maine Composite Center speak about floating offshore wind technology and its potential. And this was back in 2009. And I said, wow, I have never seen a scientist or engineer move an audience to action so persuasively. And I just had to work with this man. And so I went up to him right after I saw him speak and pitched him on a job, and he made me an offer, and we worked together closely for 5 or 6 years, bringing to life the largest R&D program in Maine's history, which was for floating offshore wind technology, and it's still going strong. And so, and I forget your second question. Do you mind repeating it?
No, sure. Yeah. I was just wondering about maybe some of those unique either opportunities or challenges that come with that particular niche.
Right. So you have quite the educational background yourself. So I'm sure that you've worked with a number of scientists over the years, both directly and indirectly. And scientific communications, the skills you need to present data is so important so that you can get your research into the right journals. You can be at the right conferences presenting, right? However, when you're trying to raise money for a new venture, or you're trying to get your SBIR funding proposal funded, or you're trying to get your first family and friends investors in your new company, right? You have to be a little bit more persuasive. You have to understand your target audience. You have to start thinking about how you're going to reach them, through which channels and what messaging. And that's really where this book comes in, is to help the scientist turned entrepreneur really make sense of that in a context that makes sense to them. If you've read a lot of the primary marketing books that basically every marketer worth their salt has read, the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, Positioning, Hey, Whipple, Squeeze This, none of them really talk about the unique factors that go into communicating technical information, maybe to a non-technical audience, like a potential friend or family investor in your company. The general public, if you think about COVID, right? And you think about just rolling out diagnostic testing in the United States, if there had been not just scientific communication, but more marketing persuasion, scientific persuasion, we might have seen greater uptake on diagnostic testing. We might have seen that those pandemic responses rolled out in a better way, more effective way. And so that's really what this book is about helping these scientists make sense of marketing communications and persuasion and deal with some of their very niche specific challenges.
Now, you mentioned target audience, which leads me to this question that there are diverse backgrounds in science professionals, right? So how do you go about to actually identify and understand the specific target of that audience for your science-related product or service?
Also, such a great question. We always start by having that conversation with the inventor. Usually it's the scientist CEO, right, at this stage. And so that inventor or that team has developed a product typically that solves a certain problem for somebody. Hopefully, right? Very often, no matter what domain you're working in, a product's been developed that doesn't really solve a problem. But let's say that their product really does solve a problem. The next question is for whom? And then how can we reach that audience with the right messages to help sell that product, or get them to sign up for a sample or a demo, or even in the very early stages, a focus group. Let's make sure that that product even really has that audience backing it, that the scientist entrepreneur thinks that it does. And so we ask a lot of questions about what the product was designed for, who it was designed for. A great example is, products that are marketed to other scientists. So let's say you're a scientist and you've developed a piece of equipment for use in other scientists' laboratories, right? There are very specific ways that you're going to figure out who that audience is. You know what labs can hopefully make use of this particular solution that you've developed. And then we work on how to reach them. What are the right scientific seminars that you need to be at? What are the right mailing lists you need to be on, the right trade journals, and that sort of thing. So your channels really fall out of target audience identification and making sure that you understand the problems they're facing.
Awesome. Can we talk about the book title? So what's the backstory on the Giant's Ladder?
Sure. So there's the famous Isaac Newton quote about standing on the shoulders of giants. And this is something that resonates with scientists because, and this is actually one of the factors that can make it sometimes difficult to get a scientist who's so used to having data integrity to be persuasive, because they see persuasion almost as stretching the truth of the data, which is not what it is, right? And so the Giant's Ladder title comes from the fact that if you're a scientist, you're always standing on the shoulders of the giants of your particular field who came before you. And you can do the same thing with the scientific organizations who are doing their marketing communications well. And so that's really what this is about. If you're a scientist reading this book, you already know who the influencers are in your particular field of study and research. You might not understand who they could be in terms of science marketing. And so I pull in a lot of case studies into the book to make that a little bit more real for the reader.
I love it. Thank you for the explanation. So, how important is content marketing for science professionals? And then, what types of content, have you found that's been really effective in your work?
That's another great question. Content marketing is just so important because it's a way of creating a conversation with your target audience, which might be your buyer, it might be an influencer in your organization that you're trying to sell into. And that content can vary based on what you're trying to do. So from a traditional marketing perspective, there's certain content that we consider top of the marketing funnel. And I don't want to get too jargony just in case other scientists are listening to this conversation too. But top of the marketing funnel content, that means you're casting a wide net, right? These are your blogs, your press releases, your open access elements. From there, you might narrow your content to be very, very specific and focused on sub-targets within your audience. You might focus around specific messages or campaigns that you're running within your marketing program. And to do this more traditionally, this is when we start talking about content like webinars or demonstrations at trade shows, podium presentations at trade shows. This gets to be often gated content or content that's gated through a scientific organization. You have to be at that organization's event in order to interact with that demo. And then sort of the bottom of the funnel, very traditionally across industries, are those case studies and other elements that your sales team can use to continue the conversation, really gauge interest. Is this a lead that's actually interested in buying or demoing my product or taking that next step, or are they not? And I think even more important for science marketing, these documents need to be both persuasive, but also contain a lot of data, visualizations, elements that really attract scientists, right? If you're used to reading peer-reviewed journals all day, you're not going to want marketing materials that sounds like they were written by people who aren't in your field, right? Non-specialists. So really making sure that even though these are marketing materials and they don't need to be as beefy as a journal article, that they're still providing quality content that the rest of your team can use to engage with people within your target accounts or your target customer base.
You mentioned trade shows, and I know in your book it says, let's see, from exhibit halls to podiums, right? And that's supposed to help them go from trade shows, right, to the next level. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yes, especially in the science marketing world, trade shows, scientific conferences, and seminars are so important to meeting with prospective customers, but also other people within your orbit, influencers within your field of study that could help increase the reach of any of the marketing that you're doing. So these are not just your customers you're talking to, it's a lot of other influencers within the space. Now, when you invest in a conference or a trade show activity, though, it can be very, very expensive. It's one of the heaviest line items in budgets that we see for our accounts, that our clients at High Touch Group. And this is because they're expensive. I mean, the average trade show in the US, we're talking between $30 and $60 per square foot of exhibit space. And most of these spaces are 10 feet by 10 feet minimum. And then you have to have a trade show booth or a demo there. You have to get electrical hooked up if you're running equipment in the booth. You have lighting, AV. All of that combined means that some of these trade shows are between $25, $30, $100,000 for clients. And so before you go to those shows and just invest a ton of money, you really need to know why you're going. You need to have a solid plan for what you're doing there so that that's not wasted marketing funds, really. And so what we recommend, especially for new entrepreneurs, scientists turned entrepreneurs, is to make sure that they've attended that conference before, that they've walked the expo hall floor, that they know what those podium presentations are like, what the panel conversations are like, so that in the following year, when that show comes up again, they know, okay, yes, our target audience will be there. The people we need to talk to will be there. And this is worth us submitting a podium presentation. We have the data to support what we want to talk about, and we think it's a good fit for the show, or is it not? Are we right for a poster presentation? Or is it time that we get our own booth and make that investment? And what size investments can we undertake? And one of the pieces that I walk through in the book is really this idea of how do you put those trade show budgets together to know whether you can afford to attend and at what level. You'd be surprised what first-time trade show attendees are surprised. They get hit by those first bills for hooking up electrical or these other things, right? Hanging a sign above your booth, things that you just don't think are going to cost you a lot of money if it's your first time. You might be spending $2,000 just to hang a sign. So you really need to go to these events with a plan so that you're not reporting back to your investors or your board that you spent a lot of money and don't have much to show for it.
Wow, that's an eye opener. It really is. So how do you measure success? I mean, what are some of those key performance indicators that you typically focus on when you're measuring the success of a marketing campaign?
Sure, that's another great question. There's a chapter in the book, chapter 7, that goes through how we develop a data and analytics plan. Now, this is actually fascinating for me, just as somebody who loves humans and human psychology. Scientists really love data, which makes sense, just on the surface. But for marketing campaigns, they love their data, right? And so once you start providing dashboards for clients around what a marketing campaign's activities are and whether we're tracking towards certain key performance indicators, they often like to go down a lot of rabbit holes before, as opposed to chasing the very specific key performance indicators that we really want to see. So chapter 7 of the book goes through, what are those key performance indicators? How do we track them? How do we know if we're on track to meeting certain targets early on? And then what levers can we pull? What adjustments can we make if we see that our early data really isn't working for us? So let's say you have a low open rate in an email campaign, just a really simple example. What are some levers that you can pull to increase open rate? The number one for open rate is subject line. If you're sending an email and the subject line just really doesn't speak to your audience, then naturally they're not going to open it. Even if you have pretty good engagement with that database that you sent that email to, you can have low open rates just because the subject line's bad. Alternatively, send time, one that we see very often when we're going into marketing plans we're going into marketing departments at kind of larger organizations, and we're looking through past campaign data. Very often people are still sending email campaigns at times when their audience is asleep because they're sending, from Pacific US time to Europe, and they're sending those emails at a time that by that time that person's woken up, they're going to have 50 other emails in their inbox ahead of that one, and they're just not going to see it. And then of course your email open rates are bad. And so really a lot of it is kind of common sense. A lot of marketing is common sense. How do you engage with people? How do you measure what's working and make little adjustments along the way? But really honing your data analytics plan to what's most important and what the levers you can pull are really important for small teams, which a lot of these early science companies are very small teams. So they need to be very focused in the KPIs that they're tracking towards.
I love that. And your information, although focused on science professional, really is transferable. A lot of it. Like you said, a lot of it is common sense. And so that's the through line for me, in the marketing space. You also talk about one of the concepts is optimizing media channels. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So we work very hard with scientists to get them as much free media as we can, because especially for these small organizations, they're working with very limited budgets. They could blow up in 5 to 10 years and be the perfect advertiser for some of those outlets. But in the short term, they need some press coverage early on, right? And so we work very closely with those clients to develop what is their media pitch list? What does that look like? As opposed to just putting a press release out on a wire service and hoping it gets pickup. We really we develop targeted pitch lists essentially with those organizations. We prep those CEOs for their interviews, get their media kits together, and then hopefully they're ready for prime time when their interview comes up. But that really does help get them some early press hits and some early I'd like to say traction almost from a marketing perspective. Take my venture capital hat off for a second, because it's not exactly the same thing as traction from that perspective, but some early marketing program traction, get their messaging out there, see what we can get back for some bites, because from there, we're leveraging the credibility of those publications and giving some of it, transferring some of that credibility onto that organization or that CEO, right? A great example, one of my favorite publications is 360 Diagnostics, 360DX. Great publication, great reporting in the diagnostics sector. So lots of medical devices, the latest and greatest tests for cancer or other human health conditions, veterinary health conditions, and so on. They do just such a great job of covering these early companies, right? And then those same early companies go on to purchase advertising with them later on, once they have a little bit more funding and they have some early customers. So especially with our very early stage companies, we work a lot on media with them. It's just very important.
Wow. So the book was released on January 23rd. And so for all of those individuals who are ordering, picking up the book, what do you want them to get out of the book? What are the takeaways that you want them to walk away with?
I would love for a scientist entrepreneur to say, you know what, this book helped focus me. It helped me develop my marketing strategy. I was able to use that marketing strategy to help pitch my company to early stage investors and get some early stage funding. And now maybe we've even landed our first customer, right? Or our first customers, or we're at least further along that pathway. The nuance there, though, that is incredibly important is being in a marketing agency environment. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of other marketing agencies as well, and prices are really high. And so if you're going into those engagements and you don't know how to work with an agency, how to keep them focused on very specific goals, they can just go down rabbit holes and use your full retainer budget or project budget before you've even blinked your eyes. And now you've wasted all of that money. And it's an issue that is incredibly prevalent no matter what industry you're coming from, not just the sciences. But in the sciences, I'd say that it's incredibly prevalent just because oftentimes the leader of the company does not have a business background. They have a science background. And so I hope that they leave, after they finish this book or they listen to the audiobook, they walk away feeling like they have some of the tools to have those conversations and to work with some of those early agencies or marketing new hires or interns that they might bring into their organization. Keep them focused.
Awesome. So please let everyone know where they can pick up the book, where they connect with you and follow you so they can find out all the wonderful things that you have coming up.
Excellent. So you can buy the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all your favorite booksellers online and offline. The audiobook is available on Audible and Chirp. You can also order in bulk. We're doing right now a lot of bulk purchases with entrepreneurship centers, with tech transfer offices at universities and national laboratories, and with scientific organizations. You can go to elizabethchabe.com and place bulk orders for the book. You get discounts, and it's just great for science book clubs. We're working a lot with those.
I love it, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for taking the time out and just sharing all about the Giant's Letter. First of all, I just love the title. Thank you for sharing all this information. I really appreciate you being my guest today.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. And to my viewers and to my listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey as we explore the depths of our guest's vision and purpose. Your vision is the compass guiding you through life, and your purpose is the fuel that propels you forward. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep pursuing your purpose. Every step you take brings you closer to that fulfillment of that purpose. I am your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, and until next time, live life with vision and purpose. Thank you for joining another episode of Vision and Purpose Podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe. Please join us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.